Good evening and welcome to another edition of The Addicts Advocate. I'm your host, Dusty Dean, and it is my pleasure to introduce Kevin Kuhlow. Kevin Kuhlow is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor with VisitHealthRecovery out of Los Gatos, California, here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It is my pleasure to meet this man in person, either it's via internet, but nonetheless, we've talked for a few times. And you've got a great story, first of all, sir, and you have a great message, and you also have a great program that you're helping people in recovery of all aspects. And so with that, I'm going to kind of give the floor to you. And I think what's important is that we understand that, it's difficult to understand addiction unless you've dealt with it yourself. And I know that you come from a background of that sort. So I want to kind of let you take the floor and discuss, what drove you to become a therapist.
Great. Thanks, Dusty. I appreciate it. So I spent 25 years in wealth management. I had a really successful career, raised my family. I think it was pretty much a typical Bay Area lifestyle, right? It was successful. It was hard driven. It was fast paced. It was, trying to keep up with the Joneses type of lifestyle. I think a lot of people live that, right? And I started to went through a divorce, and unfortunately, and really started to probably just, I was probably drinking too much all along, right? There was these patterns, right? But I never recognized it. I think a lot of my peers didn't recognize it in that field. It was just an accepted part of the industry. The martini lunches all over. You can watch it in a movie and you can see that. And it's, Wolf of Wall Street and all that crazy stuff. And I think we lived that, and it was just expected. So, it was there, but it was just under the radar. And then once I got divorced, I started drinking a little bit more. I found it as a coping mechanism. It was for stress. And I realized it was starting to become a problem, right? It was starting to impact my performance. I was an athlete. I was starting to, not be able to play baseball on Sundays and things like that. And I said, okay, I need to do something about this. I attended a couple AA meetings and did that. And then kind of just decided to quit. And right as I did that, I got a MRSA infection in my spine. And so 6 months in the hospital, right? And kind of the story that we're familiar with. The doctors loaded me with pain medication, right? It was morphine in the hospital. It was morphine, it was Oxycontin, it was Norco, all these different medications. And I realized after about 6 months and having surgery on the spine and everything that I really, really liked these, and the doctors would keep on giving them to me if I begged, right? So it's that story, and so I decided I needed to stop these as well. And it wasn't effective because I think the pain medication really kind of changed the way I lived my life. And that was, I went into blackout. It wasn't just normal drinking now, it was blackout drinking. I think one of the defining moments is I sat at a bar one day and I looked down at the end of the bar and I go, man, this guy's here every day. Every day this guy's here. And then I was like, uh-oh, I'm here every day. So that's a bad thing. So smart guy drinks at home instead, right? And then it progresses. So I went into treatment. The treatment didn't really resonate with me. It was sitting. I felt like everybody was telling me what's wrong with me, right? And that I lived a bad life, and there was the shame and the guilt and things like that. And so I looked for another way. And so I started researching top performers. I looked at Navy SEALs. I looked at athletes, top business people, and I kind of looked at what were they doing to manage the stress in their lives? How are they coping with these high intensity lifestyle that they were living? And I found common themes: fitness, nutrition, breath work, cold showers, one of my favorite things, right? Cold plunges, things like that. There were all these tools that were out there, and I started to apply them into my life. And then I started looking into positive psychology and fell in love with the concept. It's okay. It's not what's wrong with you. It's what's right with you, right? It's use those strengths to handle your problems, right? And that my weaknesses were actually underdeveloped strengths. So I could just work on those weaknesses and get better in those areas and improve my overall quality of life. So I kind of looked at addiction as a performance issue, not as a disease, right? A little bit of a different model, right? It was just, I'm not coping with the world. So I decided to go back. I went and got my master's, became an addiction counselor. Started my PhD in organizational psychology, looking at performance and motivation is the key, and leadership, which is amazing because a lot of the things I bring to my clients come from there, right? It comes from motivation, it comes from leadership, it comes from performance analysis and things like that. I spent 7 or 8 years in the public sector working for a company called Project 90, which is a nonprofit in San Mateo, helping underserved areas. And then went into my private practice and then got the opportunity at Visit, just a phenomenal organization and a great opportunity to help build their addiction program in Los Gatos and really be the pilot for what they want to do in the entire country, which is provide the highest level of service and really reach as many people as we can, help as many people. And so it's just a really kind of great opportunity. So that's it.
I love it. I love the approach, and yeah, I mean, regardless of how and why we get into the states that we get into, especially when it comes to addiction, there's definitely got to be a motivation to change, right?
Yeah,
And I think that that's important, and I know for myself personally. I mean, again, I was dealing with it, for the most part, consciously and unconsciously for 20 years, and again, with the way that these substances in our life requires to ultimately use more and more and more to get the same effect and to manage our life. It gets to a point where we just biologically can no longer handle the things that we're doing to ourselves. And there gets to a point of simply, are you done? Right. Because if you get to that point of truly being done and you're no longer contemplating, right, you're in a plan of action, that's when I think for anybody, right? I mean, it's like, especially if you're trying to change jobs, if you're getting ready to start a family, get married, right? All these things have changes and you have to be willing and fully vested in order to make anything be successful in your life, right?
sure.
So I guess in a sense, I understand the overall approach. What does, I guess let's back up. You obviously with Visit Health Recovery, there are a lot of different formats in which a client can approach you and say, "Hey, I need help. What are my options? What can you give me some examples of what those things look like?"
Sure. I think the concept that we were bringing is we want to meet the client exactly where they're at. We want to help them, and so clients come to us at different levels of stages of change. They come to us. Some of them are, hey, I think I have a problem. I don't need a group. I don't want to come in there. So we're going to be able to provide individual counseling for them to guide them. Brief intervention. Usually they come in for like 6 sessions, either virtually. Most of those are virtual. A lot of those are professionals who are too busy working and they're kind of ashamed to come into a group setting sometimes. The shame is a big issue, and we can help them there. And then we have an intensive outpatient program, which is between 9 and 19 hours a week. We have a variety of health and wellness groups, positive psychology, acupuncture. So we're really doing this kind of holistic, broad-based curriculum, keep people engaged and interesting. And then we have a high-intensity program that's designed for people that maybe have just come out of treatment and they still need additional treatment, but they want to have some freedom in their lives. And so they come in 5 days a week for 5 hours a day, in most cases, 20 to 25 hours a week. A very similar curriculum. Matter of fact, there's some overlap there because they join with our outpatient. But, our goal is to move up and down the ladder, all the way down to, long-term monitoring, which I think is overlooked in this field, is to give people, a checkup every 3 months, give them a counselor to reach out to in case they're struggling. So we have all those services available, live or virtual.
That's wonderful, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. There's definitely we need to leave these systems with a sense of a community, right? The sense that somebody cares. Empathy is big in this business. I know personally that I've never had as many friends in my life now that truly understand me, that have been, with similar struggles, and we can be wholly ourselves. There's no judgment. And even, post treatment, we can still talk about, the things that are bothering us, even if, we have a triggering mechanism, and work with each other through that, right? Because with addiction, we isolate, right? And that's, we're trying to do the opposite of isolation here. We're trying to bring together a community. Can you tell from the beginning if someone is that will follow through with getting better?
I think it's this disease is individualized. I think the way that I look at this is everybody's journey into addiction is different. The garbage in the middle looks a lot the same, and everybody's journey out is different. So somebody comes in, and I've seen clients that not engage right away, and they'll have a couple of relapses, and then they just get sick and tired, right? They're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and kind of that great expression. So they basically grab on and they engage. There's some key things that I see from people. If they embrace them right away and they execute, they have more success than I've seen historically. One is if they take care of their nutrition and their fitness. Those clients, I've seen clients who take an exercise program, and they establish that, and they eat healthy, and they start sleeping better, have higher rates of performance. It's a very common theme that I've seen. The other area is, believe it or not, one of my favorite. The first thing I teach a client is about the cold shower. So it's and now cold plunge is getting all this. I've known this. I've been using this for a long time now. It's all over the place, right? I'm like, man, they're stealing my thunder. This was my thing. But it's interesting because I'm trying to teach them to handle fight and flight response, right? So they get in there, that ice cold, and it's lousy, and everybody tells me how much they hate it. And I'm like, that's great. It's a little bit of suffering. It's good. It's not bad. Now, did you control it? Did you breathe? Did you execute, right? The breath work that we talked about in there. Did you calm yourself, right? All those things. If they start to get there and they start to practice these things, then I think they're going to apply the breath work, the meditation, the mindfulness activities. And I think I always equate it to the story of, if you put a baseball glove on somebody and you throw them out at shortstop and they say, okay, you're playing shortstop for the Giants now, probably going to make about 100 errors in the game if you've never played the position or ever played baseball, right? What do? They practice these things time and time and time again, over and over and over again. And then when game time, they can execute. Well, I think it's the same thing in recovery. If you're not practicing these things, those tools disappear. And when the stress comes, guess what? You go to the number one thing you know. The brain's wired that way. You've wired your way. The neural network is set that way. And the body starts craving. The dopamine gets that little spike. I got a craving. Let me go get it.
Understand. You brought up a couple of good points there. In addiction, right? We want to avoid, right? That's why we do what we do. We don't want to deal with our problems. We don't want to deal with the pain. We don't want to deal with trauma, grief, loss, etc. Yeah. And in recovery, we have to learn to be uncomfortable, right? Sitting in the shit sometimes, processing our feelings. And I know that the military uses the phrase "embrace the suck," right?
Yeah.
It's going to suck, but embrace it, right? And I've done cryotherapy myself, full chambers, and in just a couple of minutes, you have to sit there and you have to figure it out, right? And you either get out of it and say forget this, or you don't. And I find that cold showers, these things have great mental health benefits, right?
Huge.
Great mental health benefits.
Yeah, I just saw that if you sit in a cold bath for 5 minutes, right, it'll have a 2.5 time increase in dopamine, right? So it's equivalent to drinking, but it lasts for 2 to 3 hours, which is really, really dramatic. So here's this nice raise of motivation and energy from something that takes 5 minutes. That's a little bit of uncomfort, and that's been used a lot with cocaine, by the way. That's a really interesting thing with people with cocaine addiction, is those types of cold baths can use to help people. So I find it really, really a great tool.
Yeah, I know that, my understanding of addiction, and just with the dysregulation of these feel-good transmitters, right? Dopamine, serotonin, is that, our addiction, especially if you have those genes that lead you towards addiction, you get a dysregulation, right? And that baseline of where you used to be prior to the addiction is so much lower that you're constantly trying to get back to a normal feeling, and that's why we use. And so there's a couple ways to approach it, right? We will white knuckle it and substitute it with, feeling good by overtraining at the gym, or
Yeah.
being, workaholic ourselves.
Right.
And we still are out of balance, right? And sometimes it's just it's abstinence, maybe some medication to help us, buy the time to get to a point of neutral again, right? And being okay with not needing to feel a high all the time, right? And
Yeah.
being okay with okay days, and
Yeah.
that's
Exactly. Yeah.
and
Acceptance.
right. I lived a life. It felt like that if I wasn't high, I was in despair, and there was no middle ground. And I go through a lot of days now where it's just like the day was just it was, and I say good as a general term, but it was okay. Like nothing fantastic happened, but I was completely okay with that. It's not like I was preoccupied with, okay, well, I got to feel better, and so I can't wait till I get home so I can use and do, or heaven forbid, I try to find it in some way during work, and then you have the financial repercussions of getting caught with something like that, um, and it just it's sad when we have a society that is, I think, for the most part, for too long we've stigmatized addiction, right? We associate it with basically the homeless person who's alone that's got a heroin needle in their arm. And I've come to understand in my recoveries that I've met so many brilliant people, just like yourself, that are successful, have been successful, who are operating $100 million companies, high-tech CEOs, lawyers, doctors, you know, it, all these ranges of just truly brilliant people that, and again, life is such that it waits for none of us. And we are sometimes dealt with a lifestyle that it's overbearing, it's overwhelming, especially being obviously here in the Bay Area. We've got,
Yeah.
we do have a rat race. We have a keep up with the Joneses mentality for a lot of it. And people have lost the sense of happiness because they don't even know what it is. They're following what everybody else has been doing. Right.
I'll be happy when I get this. I got this. Well, I'll be happy when I get that. It's that continual
Right.
chase. I think
Yeah.
for myself, I lost my identity. It was the
Yeah.
reality is one day I just was sitting there drinking and I was at this really bottom and I was like, I'm really low. I don't have anybody to support me. I've alienated a bunch of people that I cared about, including family. I'm alone and I don't know who the hell I am. I really don't. I just didn't know. I had this vision of a father and a family and a successful life, and it was gone. And I think a lot of people I talk to, they're in that transition, right? There's a lot of our clients who just come in and they're going through divorce or the relationship is damaged. Maybe the kids have left the house, off to school, and the mom doesn't know who, she used to be the mother, and now her role has changed, and she doesn't know who she is. These are really, really common problems that I see on a day-to-day basis. I think it's really deeper than addiction. Sometimes it's about discovering who we are, again.
And I think that, COVID did a number on a lot of us, and it questioned our identity there too. And so
Yeah.
people had never, in our modern times, we've never gotten to that point in society where everything stopped so severely and people lost their sense of identity because their identity was, there was no more self-care. It was gone.
Yeah.
All their pleasure in life was all deemed from external things. And if those
Yeah.
things weren't in their lives, they were destined to fail.
True.
I think that is the one thing, right? I mean, it's a balance between, it's okay to be selfish in this, right? Recovery is a very selfish, personal thing, but
Mhm.
we have to learn again to take care of ourselves, right? It's the airplane air mask situation, right? You don't go put your kids on first, even though it sounds completely illogical to go and put your kids' air mask on before you do yourself. You got to take care of yourself first. Put yours
Yeah.
on first, and then you help the person next to you. And when we're in our own better state, right, we are that much more available to help others.
Uh, well said. It's just you said it perfect. Couldn't say it better.
Thanks. If you had somebody that basically came to you, one of the things that was fascinating for me when I went into recovery was like I was there for 10 days and I basically was told, well, wait, 30 days isn't it? I was figuring like, hey, I was going to do this 30 days. I was going to be miraculously healed. I was going to get on with my life. And that was it. And one of the counselors said, hey, if we told everybody the amount of time that it would take to truly, maintain a sober lifestyle, people would never get their foot in the door to begin with, because people can justify 30 days of intensive treatment, right? But they're going to sit there and go, well, wait a second, 60, 90, I can't dedicate my life. And again, especially here in the Bay Area, I can't dedicate that time in my life to go and take care of myself. I need something. I need the, get rich in 5 days type of ordeal. I need, I get sober in 5 days and get on with life. But the reality of it is that that's the truth, and that's okay. And if once people again are willing to make this change and they're willing to admit this is a lifelong thing, and it's because it's that old self that you had in your life is gone. That's the point, is to make that person dead and gone, and so that you can wholly be you and this new you and this better you, and that's the life you're going to live now. So it's going to require a constant self-awareness. It's going to require a challenging yourself at times, processing things that you've never processed before, and or at least, the last time you processed them, you were in your teens, and you forgot how to process those things because you didn't have the options to use and deal with the addictions, right? Deal with the things that, the troubles in life. So what sort of timeframes and treatment do you recommend someone who is seeking a change? I mean, I know that you said that you basically are trying to meet people where they're at, and that's uber important, right? But how do you lessen that blow of this life-changing event that people ultimately need to do?
I don't know that I come at it from a recovery point of view, and maybe a little bit different. And what I mean by that is, I talk about a lifelong journey, right? This is all part of your journey, right? Where the struggle and the shame that you have around that, we put that away, because that's really the reality is it was part of your journey to make you the best version of yourself. So what we're talking about is that, that day by, it's one day at a time. Well, I tell people it's one day at a time, but it's one day, this is a lifelong journey, and it's about improvement and being the best version of ourselves. So don't think about it as just not drinking and fighting an addiction. Think about this as a lifelong journey to be the best version of yourself. So it's not 30 days, it's not 60, it's a lifetime. And it's a lifetime of really seeking growth and learning and becoming the better version. I mean, I love hacking, and I love my clients. That's what I tell them. It's like, if you've got a curious mind, you're always stimulated, right? You're not bored. If you're trying new things, you're always going to be stimulated. If you're not doing anything, you're sitting on the couch, probably going to get bored. And boredom is going to lead to thinking about the past and shame and all those things. And, what's our biggest risk? Boredom and overstress, right? So let's look at growth. Let's not look at it as a 30-day intense, we got treatment, and we're going to do some hard work, and but it's also got to be fun. And that's the way we try to do our treatment program, is to add some really fun things to it.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, we're doing a comedy workshop, for example, on addiction. So everybody's going to come in, and I have a couple comedians coming in, and they're going to.
Oh, I love it.
We're just going to do a Saturday afternoon, and anybody can come in who wants and work on make fun of their own addiction.
Well, we see that successful out there in the real world with comedians now. I mean, right? They talk about their mental health struggles, and again, and a lot of it shapes our different perspectives in this world, right? And it helps, I think, also broaden our understanding of what it is. And I think that's important.
Right.
What do you think are the biggest challenges for somebody in recovery?
I think today's high-paced society is one. I mean, I just think there's so much, we're stimulated so much from so many different areas, whether it's, social media and just, I think the phone is a huge challenge for a lot of people now. They're living on it. They're getting stimulated. They're getting frustrated on things, world news, politics, all these things. It's a very volatile time in this country, right? So in the world, right? So I think that's a huge challenge. And I think the other one is ego, and that's the ego level of, I've got this. I don't need to continue to practice. You know what? I have too much work to do today, so I'm gonna skip the gym. I'm gonna skip my breath work. I'm gonna skip taking time for myself. I'm not gonna make a nice meal for myself. Instead, I'm just gonna go get fast food, right? And all those things hurt us by, if we hurt the body and we don't rest and do the things we need to do. I think that's a huge challenge for people today because there's so many demands on us. That is with having a family. I had a family. I got work, I got family, I've got bills, I've got, I want my soul. It's like, where do I get the time? 4:30 in the morning is what I found for myself. That's what works, right? I just get up early and that's my time to take care of myself. At first it was horrible, but now it's pretty damn awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's important, right? Is that we have to give ourselves our time every day just to rebalance, because we have a lot of demands in our life, and sometimes it feels like we're just treading water, and next thing we know is, the year's already gone and we're looking at next year, and before we know it, we're 6 months into that year and we're like, okay, what are we doing, right? We've lost a sense of being present because we're too busy, focused either on the past, ruminating in that, or we're too pressured to, this is where I got to be in X, Y, and Z amount of time. And so they've lost the day, right? And that just, I think that leads people down a miserable path. If there was a suffering addict who, basically came to you, but really, hasn't thought about, seeking help, and you recognize that they were dealing with issues internally and, it was affecting their lives, what would be, the one thing that you wish that they knew?
Well, I would wish that they wouldn't have to hit bottom. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have to hit that bottom, right? So, I if I could give advice to anybody, it would be, to just have them look at themselves and ask them how happy they really are, especially after they use, right? Is that, what are they really feeling? And if they're feeling any kind of guilt and shame, try another approach, try something different. Because, that bottom, that's a miserable place. That's a lonely, lonely, sad place to be. And so you can see people suffering, but, you can't lead the horse to water, right? You've got to let them make their decisions. So I think it's just trying to show them a different light.
Yeah.
It's a hard question. That was a hard question.
And again, I think that, you, like you said, you meet people where they're at, and everybody's rock bottom is different, right?
Correct.
Some recognize, what, hey, I'm kind of just waking up feeling not as great as I used to because I'm having a couple cocktails at the end of the day. Some people, unfortunately, are in serious accidents. Some people have, lose a lot of things in their life. And some just become highly mentally unstable, right, in their addiction. And it just starts affecting everything else in their life. And so, yeah, it is a tough question. And I wasn't expecting, the definitive thing. I mean, there is no golden bullet, but with that, but again, this is really just food for thought for somebody who's ever contemplated it. I know I joke with my wife that I had back in 2006, 2007. I'll never forget. I was at a casino with her, and I said, good night, I'll be up shortly. And next thing I know is I'm probably 8 to 9 vodkas on the rocks, and I'm about 1,500 in the hole, and I'm 4 o'clock in the morning, stumbling in. I'm praying over the porcelain god, puking my guts up, and I look up at her and I go, why do I do this to myself? How did I get from having a good time to this point? Because again, everything becomes gray, after a certain point in your addiction, right? Especially during the course of going from conscious to not. and I still, but again, that was 2006, here I am, 18 years later, and, and finally getting it. And thankfully, the damage that I done could have been worse. And the consequences of my actions in those things could have been much worse, and things that I probably may have never been able to reconcile with myself, and ultimately led me deeper down the hole, or, heaven forbid, the thoughts of ending my life. And that's what happens. But yeah, I think that people need to understand that, what, this guilt and shame and all of this that we're doing to ourselves, it's all part of, for lack of a better term, the devil's workshop, right?
Yeah.
You're you're feeding right into his hands. There's this, we're perpetuating this thing within ourselves, and we're at a point where we just psychologically can't get out of it. And as soon as we get to a moment of clarity, our withdrawal symptoms are so severe that
Yeah.
it leads us right back to where we were at, because we don't understand that there's a better way. Or
Yeah.
we just can't deal with the sobriety because the physical symptoms of it are just too painful.
Yeah. And I think that recovery out, I will always tell people to look at, there's after we get past that withdrawal, there's that time frame where, something negative it's the end of the world and I'm going to drink relapse. There is hey, I'm having a great time and I've been sober for 6 months, so let's have a couple drinks and make it better relapse, right? And it starts it all over again. And then there's the one that I have no idea how that bottle ended up in my grocery cart, right? Which I hear all the time. It's like, I can't remember that. So I say that we got to look for those 3 different ones. So we've been talking a lot about the negative, but a lot of people end up relapsing around or have a problem with the fun side of the equation too, right? It's like they don't have a good time unless a cocktail's in their hands. Going to a baseball game or going to a sporting event. How many beers do I have, right? It's like, okay, that's the part of the event, right? No, the drinking was now the event, and the baseball game was in the background. So it's learning how to love the game again, or loving the concert, or all those things.
No, that is important, and I've put myself in some of those situations. I've been in Nashville during Christmas time, and went to the Grand Ole Opry, went downtown, and I was, because again, I like I said, I was at a point where I was done. I was like, put me in a room, throw away the key, lock the door. I'll see you when I'm better, because there was nothing else that I was doing that was working. So I conceded to external help. And I remember just being in a state of bliss, because I was so clear. I was finally, I felt like, obviously, because again, addiction, this feeling better about ourselves is going to take 6 months to 2 years, right? That's this kind of standard protocol.
Yep.
And I feel that even with myself, that,
Mhm.
it is getting better and better and better. But I got to the point where it's like, I'm a good 4 months into this, and I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I'm having a good time, and I'm able to watch, and I'm able to, sing with the wife while we're listening to some country artists, at the bar, and and just have a good time, chat and socialize with friends, but not need to be, just pounding them,
Exactly.
and that's a beautiful feeling, right? Because I wake up the next day ready to be just as ambitious with, where we're at, what we're going to do, and not
Yep.
nursing a hangover or needing to get the hair of the dog that bit me to get on with my day again.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's, it's been a blessing. And that's the thing, that it's one of the greatest acts of self-love anybody can do for themselves.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
it's something that for an addict, if they just understood that it does get better. It gets tremendously better. It gets wonderful, and you will happily watch that old you disappear and be gone. And so, yeah, I appreciate this so much, Kevin. It's just a wealth of information. I'm excited about what you guys are doing over there. I'm excited about the mobility that somebody has for options in order to get help, and how you're meeting them, where they're at. And I'm going to be an advocate for you and your services. And if I come across people, you are definitely an avenue in which I'm going to say, hey, give this guy a call, give this center a call. There's
Yeah.
lots of ways in which they can be you can be of service for them. If someone was listening to this right now and they go, well, you know what, I don't really jive with any of that, what would be some signs that somebody could pick up on for themselves, that sit there and go, you know what, maybe I've got a substance abuse problem or an alcohol problem? What, if I'm going to be introspective and look at myself, what would you be some of the key barometers?
The things they used to enjoy. Number one, of the things that they used to enjoy no longer exist, right? They're everything they're doing, every activity they do centers around drinking or having a cocktail or multiple drinks or using or whatever their substance is. Because we know it robs us of joy, right? Of all those other events. All their friends are in their drinking or using circle. In other words, there's no growth. There's no environment of excellence around them. There is no personal growth. They're stagnant is one thing I would also look at. And also I'd look at their physical health. And I think as we continue to use, and maybe we don't notice it, but the waistline gets a little bit bigger. The muscles get a little bit lagging, the energy levels decline, all aspects of it. And then I look at our relationships. How am I connecting with the people I love? Am I irritable with them? Am I snapping on them? Am I deflecting my anger or frustration on them? Do I feel disconnected, lonely? Right. And that could be that, the substances are really interfering with your personal connection. And then you look at the spiritual side, am I living by my values? Because I think that's one of the big things is rediscovering our principles of life and how we live them. Because when we're in addiction, I know that when I was drinking, I was not living by my values. I just, I was self-centered and driven. I could care less, about anybody else's feelings. It was what I felt, and that's all that really mattered, right? And so I think rediscovering that, if you're looking at your life and you're saying, I don't like the way I'm acting, it probably has something to do with the alcohol or the substance you're using is impacting the way that you have. You gotta, first thing I work on with our clients is rediscovering the principle, right? Working on the body first and then basically getting into who are they, defining their identity, what rules of life they want to live by creating their ethos, really. What's their statement of life? How do they want to be seen and how do they live it? I think is incredibly important, and so they lose their passions, they lose their principles, and they lose their identity, their purpose, all those three things.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. For somebody that's in recovery, what do you find are the best tips? What if they get a little lost, let's say for some reason or another, right? They're out of touch with their community. Maybe they're in a couple of weeks, they're on a vacation somewhere, they come back, or their work trips and they got out of touch with, some of these things. Life gets in the way, or maybe they've even experienced grief, loss, trauma. What would be some of the tips that you would suggest to somebody who's in recovery?
Well, first is always check in with yourself. Mindfulness is an important part of this process. If you're not constantly checking in with what you're doing and how you're feeling, you are probably going to slip away from the things that made you successful in your recovery in the early stages. And that's a common thing, right? It's like they get wrapped up in life. And so they're in recovery, they're doing fine. I can take some time off, right? So that's a big one, is always check in. How am I talking to the one my relationships, right? Am I getting it? I know for me, if my frustration, if I drop a pen and everything hurts on my body and I'm swearing under my breath, I'm probably needing to take care of myself a little bit, right? I'm probably, if my sleep is off, if I'm dozy, energy's low, those are all signs for me, right? There's like little things. And if I get a little snippy or passive aggressive, which is kind of my forte, A, I apologize right away, and B, because, I don't want my girlfriend mad at me, right? So, but B, and then B is I have to reflect what's going on. This is telling me that I'm moving closer and closer to a problem, and it may not be a relapse. It just may be a temper tantrum or a frustration or whatever it is, and I don't want that to happen. So mindfulness is one, I think, and my other one is always be curious. And I said that before, but I think being curious and learning and having a growth mindset just moves forward in what you're doing, right? So you don't get stagnant. So those are the two.
I love it. I love it. You brought up something that's important, is because I know that I'd had a weed addiction for 20 years, and I went through periods where I'd stopped drinking 6 years, 8 years at a time, in a couple of different occasions. And the last one was, was an 18-month, slow escalation down the rabbit hole that got progressively worse, that ultimately led me to getting a recovery. But the problem is, right, it's, if I've abstained for so long, we have a wonderful way of tricking ourselves into thinking, hey, you know what? I've got this. I've controlled it. I can go now back to a life and control that social aspect of only maybe having one cocktail at dinner. Um, and we know that just doesn't work, because I know that I've attempted it, a couple different times, and it just, one becomes two, becomes four, becomes, blackout drunk again.
Yep.
And so, I guess the one thing that because again, the problem with addiction, right, is that we reminisce, we forget all the bad times after we've been in recovery for so long. We forget all the bad times and just remember all the good times that we had while we were there.
Of course.
And that's what happens, because I don't think that there was anything triggering during those times when I started up again. I think it was anything. It was almost a false sense of confidence that I'm better. I've now got this. I've shown that I've had the willpower. Of course, it was a lie in of itself because I was using weed, in place of it. But but I think that that's important. Is constantly checking in with yourself, like you said, reflecting on what's going on, being curious, and because again, we're still evolving, right? Our lives are a constant evolution, a constant change, and what may have worked for us a couple of years ago may not work the same way as it used to.
Yeah. You said this a second ago, and I want to go back to it because I thought it was really important. Is that I remember the good times, right, and I don't remember the bad times. So one of the things I'll tell everybody, and I'll tell myself, I had fun when I was drinking. There's no doubt that I had some phenomenal experiences with friends,
Right.
and I don't want to lose those experiences. But I also, I don't want my clients, I don't want myself, I don't want anybody to feel like their life is being robbed because they've chosen not to drink anymore. I think the mentality is those times were great and it was wonderful and I enjoyed them, but alcohol doesn't work for me anymore. The times aren't great anymore. They're not fun anymore, right? And if I started again, they're probably not going to be fun again. I'm not missing anything, right? I had those experiences and now it's time for new experiences. It goes back to being curious, right? I want to find new things. I want to be out there experimenting with new things that aren't altering my mind.
Yeah. No, important. Good stuff. Um, if I'm someone who's watching somebody in an active addiction and it's difficult for me to love them, what would you say to that person? That's like, hey, you know what? I've got someone who I've been trying to get help for, right? They just don't want to do it, and I'm at my wit's end, and I feel like I need to do the tough love route, right? I'm going to sit there and go, get out of my house. But I know where that may end up leading them, right? It may end up leading them onto the streets. It may end up leading them to use more. How do I manage that love for someone who's in an active addiction?
It's one. I think it's one of the hardest questions we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? And I think it's a hard question for like a parent with a child who's struggling, but that person can only, at the end of the day, choose to help themselves, right? And it's really, I love you, and I will help you with treatment, but I can't have you in my life right now. And that's a really hard thing. How do you, I'm picturing us trying to say this to my children. How could I say that? Right? It's such an emotional thing, but that individual has to be willing to change themselves, right? And we can't force. You can force somebody into addiction, and probably the rate of success is 10%. Into treatment. I said addiction. You put them into maybe 10% because they don't want to be there. They're not engaging. They're not trying anything. They're not thinking. Maybe we grab some people. Maybe we plant a seed. I think you put them in brief interventions and have them, talk to somebody. But if they're going to refuse their interactive addiction, which there's no other choice, you have to let that person go. At least that's what I believe. You have to let them, this is hurting our relationship. I'm going to put an ultimatum down. You have to make this decision.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I agree with you. I've fortunately I never got to the point where it was a day in, day out constant argument. But it was, towards the end, I recognized that the pain that I had internally in my life, I heard this from somebody else. I'm actually robbing somebody else's quote, but I thought it was so profound, was that the pain that I was not addressing in my life, and I was dealing with it just simply by managing it, managing this pain, the trauma, the loss, the grief, the whatever it was that I was masking with addiction, is that I was transferring that to the people around me that I loved, and they didn't deserve that, right? And I know that my family, it started getting very, very pointed, with them, that like, hey, this, you can't keep doing this. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. I need you to be a son, a father, a dad, a husband. And it was, it coincided with the fact that the meaning of anything in my life started basically just whittling away. It was just, I was apathetic at a point, right? And the only way I felt anything, and the only thing I wanted to feel was good, was through addiction. And that's the only way that I could function. But yeah, no, it's, and it's not that we don't love them, right? It's not that we don't love them.
I think that was the loneliest time of my life, and just alone. I felt alone. I felt abandoned. I mean, that's what that person feels like when you hear, I can't have you in my life anymore. I can't. You're not going to help yourself, right? And I felt alone and abandoned and ashamed. And until I took ownership, until I took extreme ownership on what my life and my responsibilities, it wasn't going to change. Once I did that, the guilt and shame went away, because I knew my job was to be the best version of myself from that point forward, and that was going to take a long, long time, a lot of work to be that. It's a lifelong, like I said, a lifelong journey. I've said it multiple times.
Yeah. We're in a society now, right, where we've legalized marijuana, which when it first was getting ready to happen, I couldn't tell you how happy I was. And now, looking back on everything that I experienced with it, and recognizing that I was in a way of form, self-medicating. I was trying to manage things that I didn't want to deal with by simply using that as a method. And now it's interesting, because I'm hearing that, the whole magic mushroom thing is getting prevalent now. People are using psychedelics, and it's almost just as if that we don't just enjoy simply the reality that we're in, and the awesomeness of what we're in, and being present in it. We need these constant escapes. But it's again, and alcohol is the biggest one of them all, right? It's been normalized for so long, right, in our life, and it shows up in so many different ways in society. What's somebody that isn't even at that point of pre-contemplation, right? They, this is what we do, man. Friday nights we go to the bar, we sit and we hang out, and we have our beverages. But how do we squash those beliefs? How do we change? Or is it going to be forever a battle? I mean, it may just, again, this is, part of our lives, right? We have the good and the bad, but I'd like to think, go ahead.
Why did you start drinking? Why did you use weed? Because it felt good. Right. In the beginning, it worked. So that Friday night bar or college or, anything, it worked. Right. So how do you fight something that has such an appeal? Alcohol, everything. That's the cool thing. You do a CrossFit commercial and you're going out, working out, running and doing all this, and drink a Heineken because it's only got 99 calories, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's like, it's normalized in our society and glorified. So is it going to change? No, I think we have to get the message out. I mean, look at smoking. Smoking would be a great example of something that was normalized and promoted in everyday lifestyle and has changed. I think alcohol has gone through that cycle a little bit. I'm seeing more and more non-alcoholic beers out there. I'm going to bars and restaurants and seeing a mocktail thing. That's kind of the big corporate thing now, is the mocktail, going out and not drinking. I love Athletic Brewing Company. It's non-alcoholic and it's absolutely it's, if I really want that flavor, I don't do it very often, but I don't feel like I'm tempting fate there. but it's really enjoyable, right? And it's I can go out and feel like I'm having a beer and not worrying about it. The weed, it's a different story right now, right? Because I think the intensity of what they're creating is getting higher and higher in the concentration, and it's becoming a major issue. It's becoming a major issue with teenagers, and I think it's really got to be taken a look at, right? The levels of psychosis and schizophrenia are increasing because that's a high thing in that younger age. I think for parents, you really need to take a look at that for your teen child, is how the mental health issues that are coming from that down the road in that underdeveloped brain are really, really, really dangerous. And the access is increased, right? It's not dad's weed anymore, right? The psychedelics are getting, some of the research is great, but that's the problem with it. The research looks good, but so everybody decides they're just going to do it on their own and go try to find their spirituality. They're really just getting high. That's what they're doing, right? So, but
Yeah, I think because I think we're all, in a sense, we're in this trivial pursuit, right? It's like, why are we, they get existential, right? And so they're trying to find peace with that. And
changing your mindset, changing where you're at, your consciousness, right, has been something that we have been doing for 3,000 years. Like, it's something animals do, right? It's actually, I was watching this the other day and I was seeing that, monkeys eat these different types of fruit and get intoxicated and fall off trees. And, the animals actually pursue getting drunk. There were elephants that broke in some place to drink, the home brew that they were making there, that the elephants will charge and break in all the time because they get drunk as a skunk on this stuff, right? So it's like, so the humans, animals, we've always tried to change our mindset for some reason, right? But it's for 90% of the people, 80% of people, it works fine once in a while. It's just for that addicted mind, that's not going to happen, right? So they're gonna pursue that consistently. They're gonna love that dopamine rush.
yeah, yeah, I know it is fascinating. And again, that's why I think, obviously, in recovery, right, it's, there's this notion of the God of our understanding, right? Understanding our spirituality. There's so many different ways in which you can pursue that in a sober environment. That's enlightening. It is enlightening. And I've experienced, the mindful meditations. I've experienced, things like sound baths, which to me were
Yeah,
just highly fascinating,
yeah,
meditative, and just like truly just like understanding what it is to be in this body, and
yeah,
and being thinking, and cognizant of where you're at, being present, and yeah, and just marveling at our existence. And unfortunately, there's never enough time, right, to kind of do it all the time, but because of life's demands. But I think that enriching ourselves in all these, there's so many ways to enrich ourselves. And one of the things that I've found in sobriety is that I'm starting to get pleasure in things, like you had said, right? And the things that there were things that I no longer enjoyed doing that I used to enjoy, that gave me simple pleasure, and I lost all of it. And the only way that I had pleasure was by using. And now it's like, okay, and this is for me, just simply doing this has been a creative outlet for me that I never thought in a million years I'd do. And now I'm loving it, because for me, it's therapeutic as well. And the connectivity, and just it's enriching lives. It's enriching my own life. Kevin, this has been absolutely wonderful. I appreciate your time this evening. I'm gonna leave the floor open to you if there's anything else that you feel like you want to talk about. Is there anything else that's and again, we can do this again. We can digest this episode, and maybe in a couple weeks time, if you've got some things that you feel are really important that you want to talk about, I'd be more than happy to have you back on, and we can continue the conversation.
yeah. I would love to have that conversation. I think there's so much information, that I want to get out. It's just, if I had to leave on a point, it would really be that recovery can be positive, right?
Yeah.
Our approach is about, teaching a purpose, passion, principles, changing the body, really changing our mindset that um, life is good, right? And when it's bad, embrace the suck, as you said before, right? Yeah, as you were saying, grab it, right? It's like, okay, that there's an opportunity if we are living to grow and we are living to experience life at the high level. There's no reason that we ever want to put a substance in our body and numb that experience. Right. So I think there's a lot of things I'd love to talk about. So yeah, this is great. This has been fantastic.
I appreciate your time this evening, Kevin. Continue the great work, and we'll be in touch soon. Okay, sir?
Great. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye-bye.